so I'm Joshua Arbury. I work for Auckland Council Transport Strategy Unit, which, contrary to popular belief, is not Auckland Transport. We have about 10 people in our unit. Auckland Transport has about 1,000 people. But we tell them what to do, so that's at least that's the theory. I'm getting some ugly looks from that side of the room. I think this is a really useful event, and I think that the big, and I'll get into my story in a minute, but the big picture thing that I probably want to really highlight to everyone is that I don't think I think we need you. I don't think that the transport profession has been done that well historically. I think we're getting a lot better at it, but we spend a huge amount of public money on transport every year. About half of council's entire rate spend goes on transport, which is just miles bigger than anything else. In terms of central government spend, after the big three of social welfare, health and education, transport's pretty much up there with the next biggest amount of money that central government spends on transport. So there's a lot of money going into this area. There's a lot of reasons why the public has decided that we want to spend money on transport. And there's an interesting question: are we actually getting the outcomes that we seek from all of that public expenditure? How might we do that better? How might we get better value for money? What are we actually trying to achieve? Are we measuring the right things in terms of success and failure? And in order to do that, I think there's a lot of jobs in the future in that area of saying, I can add a lot of value in terms of ensuring that as this country spends $3.4 billion a year on transport, we're actually getting out of that spend what we want to get out of it. And yet, we don't teach transport as a specific career, particularly I suppose not transport planning, which is quite interesting, I think. Anyway, so reflections on my career. So I've always had an interest in transport. I remember as a kid, about eight years old, filling exercise books with street maps of imaginary cities. A few years ago, I sort of dug one of mine up and scanned it all in and put it in Photoshop and linked all of the maps, pages of the maps together, and then started going, that doesn't quite work, I'll fix it up. And about 2 years later, I completely redrew the city, and it was about, if you printed it, about 6 metres across and 3 metres up down, and probably about 3 million people would have been in there. I played every version of SimCity religiously, but apparently the recent one's not that good. Thank God for that. And so, I finished high school in 1999, went to Auckland University, did an undergrad degree in geography. I could have done planning, not quite sure why I didn't do planning, but I really enjoyed geography. And then eventually did a Masters of Arts in Geography, focusing on human geography and environmental geography. A lot of things about demographics, but also, once again, touching on planning. I wrote my master's thesis on the 1999 regional growth strategy, which is that whole compact city versus urban sprawl debate, which seems to never go away, which is unsurprising, I suppose, really. Then first real job out of university was for a small planning consultancy firm. Got that through my dad being to university with the person who operated that firm, so often it's not what you know, it is who you know. So I suppose I got a bit lucky there. We did a lot of assessment of Housing New Zealand's land and their development potential of their land, which was really interesting in terms of trying to find new sites for Housing New Zealand to purchase land to build social housing on, which was really interesting, gave me a really good in-depth view of all of Auckland. I think I think Weymouth was the last suburb of Auckland that I visited as a result of this, and I'd sort of ticked off every single suburb in Auckland that I'd been to. So that was really useful in giving me that really detailed overview of Auckland. Eventually that job became, I was covering for a role at the Historic Places Trust, the planner's role, and eventually that also became a full-time job, and I shifted there in about 2009, and that was quite different, but you know, once again working as part of a fairly small team, this time a public agency. Heritage is probably the only other thing that people get as passionate about as they do for transport. So it was, in a roundabout way, perhaps quite a good introduction to transport. About that time I started something called the Auckland Transport blog, which you may or may not know about, which actually emerged out of what had been a personal blog that I'd been writing since January 2001. I just found myself more and more interested in transport rather than my life, and I also found that other people seemed a lot more interested in transport than they did about my life. So went from having like about 13 hits a day, which was probably mainly me, to many hundreds of visits a day. I was, I suppose, quite surprised by the success, although perhaps not as surprised as I should have been, because transport is an issue that everyone is passionate about, everyone's interested in. It seems everyone's got their own opinion about, informed or less informed. Yeah, and so then it was, I suppose, a combination of the passion and the knowledge that I'd illustrated through writing 1,500 blog entries over the space of about 3 years, and then my planning knowledge that I'd really developed at the Historic Places Trust, getting to know the Resource Management Act backwards, knowing district plans, knowing all of this, you know, how we could twist these plans to get a better outcome, knowing how we could encourage people to do something a bit different to what they perhaps thought they wanted to do, and it was better for them and better for us, and everyone wins. All of that, I think, led to my current job, which is at Auckland Council, Principal Transport Planner. We have, yeah, as I said, a fairly small team. There's 3 Principal Transport Planners and 3 sort of Transport Planners. There's also a Transport Modelling team, which sits in the corner behind big computers with massive screens and spits out the right answer, supposedly, every time we ask the question. It is a really broad and interesting role. We pretty much have, our prime responsibility is to prepare the transport chapter of the Auckland Plan and then to see it implemented. So it's to create that high-level vision. What does Auckland want to achieve over the next 30 years in terms of transport, and how that can contribute to the goal of making Auckland the world's most livable city. Yeah, and it is really broad and interesting. It means that one day I'm helping out, providing some advice on the City Railway project. The next day I'm inputting into the unitary plan what we should do about parking, and the next day I'm down in Pukekohe talking about how the greenfield area in the south should grow, and where it should grow and where it shouldn't grow. And yeah, so things I wish I'd known at 20 was the next question that that I was asked. When I was 20, I was 3rd year of my bachelor's degree, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and that's fine. I suppose the main thing is that there are plenty of jobs out there, that you know, there's a great variety of roles, and that, you know, it didn't really matter whether I went and did a Masters in Geography or a Masters in Planning or something else. There, you know, it was about developing my knowledge of the area, developing my contacts, and then getting that work experience through 2 planning jobs, which didn't really have anything at all to do with transport. Yeah, I think in terms of skills that the public transport industry needs, I think it's that diversity of backgrounds, as I think Patrick said earlier, it's, that, put it this way, there's a guy in our team who did a master's degree in Spanish and wrote his master's thesis on Mexican soap operas. And he's probably one of the best transport planners in Auckland, I think. And I see Anthony nodding his head, yes, he's fantastic. And, he got into the transport profession by having a loudhailer and interrupting ARC transport meetings in the mid-90s, complaining that they were letting public transport die. So, all very variety of different ways you get into the industry, I suppose. But in my work, I draw from a really wide variety of skills. So the sort of land use planning skills to ensure alignment with between public transport and the land use vision for Auckland, and I suppose the reverse is true as well, ensuring that the land use vision for Auckland and how that's implemented through the details of something like the unitary plan actually supports what we're trying to achieve in our transport area. And sort of economic analysis skills does, as I said right at the start, we spend a lot of money on transport. Are we getting value for money out of that spend? And how do we assess that? Are we capturing everything that we want to assess? Environmental skills. How do we reduce the environmental impact of the transport system? If we build a new project, there will be some environmental effect of that. How might that be best be minimised or mitigated? Also, if we build this project, it may encourage this form of development, which may itself have greater CO2 emissions in the long run, or alternatively we might do something else which would have less CO2 emissions in the long run. I think the main thing is to be passionate but reasonable and well articulated. My job is largely about persuasion. I think it's about saying, hey, we've set a vision in the Auckland plan. How can we implement that vision? What you guys are doing, or what other bits of council are doing, or what other agencies are doing, do you think you could slightly change that to this, and then that would be that you still achieve what you want, but hey, that means it works better to contribute to that vision of the Auckland plan. But still being, I suppose, honest enough that great ideas come out of everywhere, and that we need to be flexible enough to accept those ideas. But it doesn't really matter, within reason, I suppose, what you study, especially Mexican soap operas. It's passionate. Grow your knowledge wherever you can, and you'll really enjoy it. I mean, I wake up every day and go, this is my dream job. I couldn't really ask for any better job in the world, and that's awesome.
Fantastic. That's a great moment for you.